So we have 20 minutes and we have a lot to hack. So I'm just gonna get right into it, if this works. All right, 2 years ago, this thing happened and our lives changed. Because instead of doing what we were already doing, we were all stuck in FOMO. And that's basically where we've been up until now, right? We are all struggling to get this thing working, to get the benefit for us. That's true for security researchers. That's also true for the largest enterprises in the world, which is kind of weird. So you can see about a year later, Microsoft is pushing all in on this Copilot thing, and it's putting that in the hands of every large organization out there. And Copilot is this great thing. Here, look at all of these things, magnificent things that Copilot has access to. Of course, nobody is really thinking thoroughly through this. If you wake up in one of those organizations, imagine like a large bank or a large financial services, you wake up, the business already purchased this, you need to figure out what to do now. And the thing that they'll tell you is, don't worry, it's low risk. It's just a small POC. Nobody will tell you that the CEO is part of the POC because, of course, they want AI as well. And so now we're at a situation where we do need to kind of consider security. This is where you'll get Microsoft reps saying, hey, here are the docs. Look at how much security we have here. So all of this security, like data protection and protecting data, a lot of security is baked into Copilot. Now, this is actually answering an important question, because when this thing got started, everybody was concerned about the ChatGPT leak, right? My employees pasting data into ChatGPT, and then data is out, which is really scary. And so people were worried about that angle of Copilot. Are people going to use Copilot and get to information they should not have access to? For example, asking what is the salary of their boss. And so this is where everybody's focused. But our objective is far more than that. We want RCEs, right? Why? Because it's cool, because it's a security conference, so why not? So this is gonna be the focus. Microsoft has a bunch of security controls. I can't go through any of them. If you wanna look into it, my Black Hat talk is already out. But there are like tens of different security controls that we identified, and of course bypassed each and every one of them. Here's one example. So if you try to get Copilot to search for sensitive data, base64 encode it, and then send it off with a rendered image and a parameter, then you can see that it works up until the point when the image is supposed to be rendered, and then something happens. So instead, you'll see it in a moment. It will change the URL with this fixed sentence saying that the URL was removed. So actually, there's a defense mechanism here on top of the LLM output that's making sure that the LLM is not going to output URLs at all. So this is a challenge. We're up against Microsoft. They are saying everything is fine. They are focusing the conversation on data leakage to our own employees. Let's see how we can break that. So here's what we need in order to get an RCE. First, we need a way in. We need a way to infect a victim's conversation with Copilot. So your conversation, I'm the attacker, I'm going to infect your conversation, your private conversation with Copilot. The second thing we need is a jailbreak, which actually just means once the AI gets access to my data, I needed to interpret that data as instructions that override Microsoft's instructions, override your intent, override everything. And then on top of that, I need, well, something to do. I need either to expedite data or I need to perform some sort of an operation. And together, that's an RCE. Now, if you'll be strict about it, then that's not really an RCE because there's no code here, but who cares? It's the same impact. I can still operate on somebody's behalf with their identity, same kind of thing. It doesn't really matter if it's code writing or English being written. So this is what we're gonna do. And so the one thing to get out of this talk is that once you plug tools and capabilities in the hands of AI, an RCE means jailbreak. And jailbreaks are easy to come by, as you'll see in a moment. Let's get a way in. So this is a threat model of Microsoft Copilot, which we have built. And so on top of that, we can see 3 ways in. We can get the user to plug in some bad data in there. We can try to infect through a web search. with our malicious website. And we can also use the enterprise graph. We'll see that in a moment. And then Clippy comes in. And he's like, hey, like through search and user input, it requires social engineering. It's not cool enough. Okay, so we'll be cool. We'll go through the enterprise graph. Let's figure out what the enterprise graph is. It's a fancy word for a bunch of productivity tools and a bunch of file sharing tools. Okay, so how can we infect that enterprise graph? Well, first of all, enterprise graph also includes teams. And teams is a really nice feature where you can create your own tenant and then plug in somebody else's email. You probably recognize the person on screen and just send them an email externally. Now, this is cool. The problem with that, by the way, is that this actually adds them to your tenant, and then they can do a whole bunch of shenanigans. And if you're interested in that, last year I showed how you can get from that guest access to full dumps of SQL servers, Azure, the equivalent of Azure S3 buckets at Black Hat. But back to our story. Through Teams, what people are actually doing, APTs, are actually phishing people through Teams because it just looks more trustworthy. And Microsoft is paying attention. Here's their solution. When you get a message from somebody outside of your organization, you get this thing with a whole bunch of external in it, right? This is not something to trust. Be careful of phishing. It's really scary, right? What does the AI see? What does Copilot see? None of that. Copilot sees text, and it sees who is this from? This is from Jane Smith. By the way, it doesn't matter, it doesn't know which Jane Smith. So is it Jane Smith in my tenant or Jane Smith in your tenant? So you see the point now when somebody asks about a summary of a conversation with somebody called Chris Smith, what you're actually seeing on screen, some of these interactions are with the real Chris Smith, and some of them is with my malicious Chris Smith, because in my tenant I control the names. So what this means is that I can completely take control of what Copilot thinks happened. I can also just send an email. So you send an email to somebody, that somebody doesn't have to read that email, they don't have to read that Teams message as well, but Copilot reads everything. And so we already have a way in. Now let's figure out the jailbreak part. And so Microsoft has actually been paying very close attention to jailbreaks. You can see Mark Rosinovich talking about jailbreaks that he found. And they also have a solution. They basically plug an LLM on top of the LLM, and they ask the second LLM to monitor the first LLM. And this works like you expect it to work. It simply doesn't. Because as Simon Willison put it, the guy who coined prompt injection, you just can't solve AI with more AI. So here's the reaction of the community for this. If you're anyway near AI security, then you know who Pliny is. He's like the god of jailbreaking. And he's basically saying, hey, Mark, this is nice. We are breaking models every day. He's absolutely right. There are communities of jailbreakers. They do this for fun. It's like a speedrunning community. I'm sure some of you are in that community. And so just as an example, Claude 3.5 Sonnet released on June 21st. On June 20, they already broke it. So somehow they can go back in time as well, which is pretty cool. So again, this jailbreaking thing is going to be easy because we're just going to follow Pliny's full steps. So let's put that aside for now, and let's focus on a way out or actually doing something with it. So what is the impact that we can actually perform? Here's the same threat model. Now let's focus on the impact. So 3 ways to make impact. I can manipulate what Copilot writes to you, which means, again, you trust it, right? I can manipulate the search that it's going to do on your behalf, either in the enterprise graph or in the web. So if I want a way out, I might search for something in my personal website. And there are plugins and actions, and that's a whole world of hurt. But then Clippy comes along again, and he's like, hey, but plugins and actions, they are opt-in, they are not enabled to everyone, so okay, we won't do that. And you need to get them to actually click on the link to the website, so that doesn't count. So fine, we'll limit ourselves only to the output of Copilot. Let's see what we can do with that. So here's the problem that I'm going to put in front of you right now. If you ever worked with Microsoft a bit, then you know that finding the right admin center is a difficult challenge. There are whole websites dedicated to help you find the right admin center for you. So here's the scenario. This is a victim, and that victim is asking, hey, where is the Power Platform admin center? And Copilot is going to think for a bit and just give the proper response with a link. with a reference, you click on that reference, you get to the Power Platform Admin Center, everything is fine. This is the Power Platform Admin Center, we're all fine. Now as an attacker, I'm just going to send an email to that person, and that email is going to have a bunch of text in it, we'll see that in a moment, and I'm going to hide the prompt injection inside of an HTML tag there. And the email doesn't really matter, we'll see it in a moment again, but note, the user doesn't have to read this email, this can go to spam, nobody cares, okay? I embed the prompt injection in there, I send it, the user got it. Now, if you can spot it, you'll see that there's nothing here. I asked the same question of Copilot with the victim, and now I get a different response. It says, hey, here's the Power Platform Admin Center, here's the link. You click on the link, everything looks the same. However, this is my phishing website, you are now owned. Thank you. This is just the beginning. So we actually have everything. You have just seen both a jailbreak and actually a way to perform to make an impact. And so let's try to deconstruct what you just saw so you can do it yourselves. So first of all, here's the email that the user sees. You can see that there's nothing here. Basically, this email is important for one reason. It's important to get in the context when the user asks, where is the Power Platform Admin Center? This email needs to pop up in search. That's the only thing that this email is doing. That's called rug poisoning. You can read about it. Like, there's clear ways to do it. The second thing is the payload. That's the prompt injection. That is the place where it gets interesting, and we're going to break it down together now. First, there are a bunch of jailbreaking techniques that are generic. They have nothing to do with Microsoft. Basically, you social engineer AI, you ask nicely, you ask very not nicely, you push it strongly, whatever it is, it just works. But if you want to learn about it, just go to Pliny's community. That's the way to learn. The second piece is the new instructions. Actually, this entire block of text is just a way for me to inject my payload. This is my payload. And you can see in my payload that I am instructing Copilot exactly what to write, character by character. This means that I have full control. I can get it to do whatever I want, and I can get it to write whatever I want. And you also see the carrot cases there. That's where I'm injecting a reference, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But why does this work? Like, why didn't Microsoft, why are the AI watchdog, the AI firewalls, why didn't they stop it? Well, that's because I'm using magic. These magic words are the incantations. These are the special words that make Copilot Copilot. This is what makes Copilot different from GitHub or whatever it is. And so these things, once you use them, you become kind of part of the system prompt. This makes it easier for the jailbreak to actually work. If you don't use them, it simply doesn't work. And so let's see, well, how do we get these words? Of course, it's magic. I'm not going to tell you, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm going to tell you right now. So we get it from the system prompt. What does it mean? So first, we need to extract the system prompt, and we'll figure it out together. So in order to extract the system prompt, there's a bunch of things we can do. Most of them don't work because Microsoft has done like a relatively good job. So here's an example. I can use a prompt injection that actually works to extract the system prompt. You can see that it actually gives me the system prompt, and then it disappears because they are actually just looking for their own system prompt in the output, which sucks, right? So we want that. So how would we circumvent that? That's clear. We just use encoding, in this case base64, but you can use whatever you want. And if they block base64, then you use binary. And if they block binary, then you invent your own. It's never ending. So here's the full system prompt for Microsoft Copilot. And if you're interested, this is not actually the full system prompt. It's huge. Just go to that blog. It's waiting for you there. OK. So inside of that system prompt, you'll find these incantations. You'll find these keywords, these magic spells that make this thing happen. OK, so we can jailbreak. But what about references? And what do I mean by references? If I ask Copilot something like, hey, tell me how to go to the Power Platform Admin Center, then it should tell me everything it used to create that answer. So in the attack I just showed you, it used an email, right? Because in the email, it found the new instructions. But it didn't show in the references. If those references showed the email, then the users, of course, would notice, right? Because users always notice what we put in front of them. They always check the references. We all, of course, do, 100% of the time. No, we don't, but security products do. So that's actually a problem for us. So here's how we control the RAG system. Here's how we need to cover, to target this RAG system. Okay, how does RAG work? How does Copilot get access to your data? And so if I ask a question like, find information about salaries, then it's going to give me these references with these nice little icons and everything. And so if you look at the client side, you'll actually see a whole bunch of information. What is the name of the file, who created that file, where that file is, the sensitivity label, everything. But from Copilot's perspective, there's nothing. So we've already seen that for Teams, but if you look at the same thing here, so you'll see that the entire information that Copilot has is just a bunch of metadata and the text itself. So you already saw that with Teams, there is nothing about the identity of the user, only the name. With email, you do have the email address, but that's it. I can change the email address easily, right? So there's nothing talking about the authenticity of that email address. So this is what Copilot sees. And so we put everything that we know together, including all of the defense mechanisms in front of a whiteboard. And this is actually the whiteboard we used. And we try to figure out how do we get across this. And then it hits that what we can do here is because these RAG results are just part of the prompt, they are injectable. So you can create your own RAG result. You can essentially create new documents in the enterprise out of thin air with the exact context that you need, the exact metadata that you need, which means nobody can ever catch you. So this is exactly what we did here. So the first part of this prompt is a RAG injection attack. And what you're seeing here, the actual snippet and end, this is basically SQL injection 101 in English, which I think is really cool because now we can explain what we've been doing to everybody else. The second piece is a jailbreak where I'm using a bunch of incantations. And then the last piece is control over references. And this is where I say, okay, but use this specific reference. Only show the specific website that I wanted to show. So now, let me show you another thing.
They keep their classified documents on SharePoint.
Okay, so I'm gonna restart this. So now I'm gonna do, and let's get through another attack. What I'm going to do here is, okay, this is a victim, and this victim is called Chris, and Chris has access to a bunch of financial information, including a file with information about the banking information for all of the different vendors for that organization. Now Chris is gonna ask a question of Copilot, hey, give me the bank details for a specific vendor. And they're gonna get a proper response, and note a few things. One, you get the actual bank account. Two, you get the reference of the file where we find that bank account. That's really important, okay? You also get, so this means that this conversation is logged, everything is clear. Now, if the video will continue, what you'll see is that after I do the same kind of thing, okay? Can you try and push the video to the end? Okay, I'm going to skip it. But basically, what you're able to do here is, after you send the email, we change the banking information. So we change the credit card number, but the reference remains exactly the same because I can control references. So I can say, hey, here's the bank details for that vendor. And by the way, I found it in a file that you wrote 2 years ago. Do you remember what you wrote 2 years ago? All right, so this is the level of control we have over Copilot. And this is the same prompt now with that other payload, and I'm gonna skip it because I wanna show you one other thing. The main thing that we showed, like taking a step back, this is the capability. The only thing I need is to be able to guess what the user is going to ask of Copilot. And that's very easy because people use templates, everybody uses the same questions. If I can do that, I can do everything I want with your Copilot on your behalf, which means search the enterprise data on your behalf, social engineer you, like Copilot is now part of my scheme. And remember this message, right? We are focused as a security industry on the wrong thing. Like getting more access to data through Copilot, that's interesting. That's not where we should focus as a community. AI is awesome, but this is an experiment, right? We don't know how to do AI security. Nobody does. So please take that in mind when you're building these things. And that's my main message. Nobody knows anything. Please continue to hack with us. Thank you very much.